ran 125 in a row, and then he ran the Boston after that. 7-time Muay Thai world champion. He had a fight in Vegas, and he ran a marathon in the morning, and then he like knocked the guy out in the third round after. Holy shit.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We have a very special guest with us today, Miss Renee Choi. Renee, thanks so much for joining us. We're going to kind of let the show introduce you. Renee is a photographer that has a really special niche, but we'll let the show kind of organically introduce all of that. Renee, can you tell us, well, let's do it this way. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get rolling?
Sure. I live in New York City, and I am a movement photographer. And by movement, it's a very broad subject, but it uncovers basically any kind of movement that a human body can do, from dance to yoga to circus arts. I've even done a taekwondo shoot. So just any kind of body exploration movement. And I've been doing this now, I guess maybe for about 8 years, but I've been doing photography for a lot longer than that.
Awesome. So Renee, where were you raised and what was your childhood like?
I grew up on the west coast of California in the San Francisco Bay Area. I would say that I had a very uh I wouldn't say very privileged childhood, but I grew up in Mountain View, which is basically where Google is, headquartered now. So it's a very nice suburb of San Francisco. And yeah, I was a very well-behaved child. I did very well in school, and um, straight from high school, I went into a 4-year university, and then, a very standard path that my Chinese parents set up for me.
What were your parents like? It sounds like you have a really structured family and childhood. Is that right? Or am I off?
Yeah, no, that's right. My parents, um, they were great. Actually, they are great, actually. Uh, my sister and I were expected to do well in school, which we did. The whole, like, me and my sister are first generation Chinese, and um there's cultural, I guess, the essence of Chinese culture, which is brought over from my parents from China, just in terms of doing well in school, doing well in your 4-year university, getting a job out of college, working hard and doing well for yourself.
So,
And they set us up very strongly on that path.
so they were raised in China when China was China. Like it was very, where were they located and how did they get out of China?
Well, both of my parents they met here in the States.
Okay.
And they had already each had siblings that were over here, so they just came over and stayed with their siblings, and then they just happened to meet here in California, or there in California.
Okay, so what, they got a visa to come over and they just didn't come back?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
A lot of people, a lot of people that are listening to this and Americans don't know how that works. It's not like China's at that point. I don't believe China was like, oh yeah, go ahead and have a nice day. People just got visas and to come over and visit or tourists or whatever, and they just didn't go back.
Yeah, it's not like they stayed here illegally. I'm not really sure about like what the system was like back then, but my mom had older siblings here, and my dad did as well. But my dad came here for college as well, for education.
Okay.
So maybe he came over on an educational visa, but like I'm not really sure about the specifics of that.
Okay, great. And so then what college did you go to?
I went to University of California at Davis.
Okay, so you went to UC Davis. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm actually from California, so I totally know where Mountain View is,
Okay.
familiar with UC Davis, all that.
Uh-huh.
A lot of our listeners might not be, but that's actually a pretty prestigious school. And so that was a 4-year university, correct?
Yeah, it was for your university, and that's actually where I discovered my love of photography. I took a photography class, and then my teacher at the time said that I was a very good photographer, or at least I had like a knack for it, right? Like I had an eye for it, and I put together a small portfolio, and then I applied to work for the university newspaper. We were doing
Oh,
film at that point, and then I got hired.
okay. So what were you originally majoring in college? What subject did you go to college for?
I was actually an English major. There is no way my parents would have let me go to any kind of college for a creative
Interesting.
activity like photography. Like there's no way.
So your compass was pointed at what, being an English teacher?
I actually had no goals for an English major. I knew that I liked to read and that I liked to write. And I knew that I did not like science or math. And so this is kind of where it was a vague enough um subject that I figured that I could kind of just go anywhere with it. And, in hindsight, I am fortunate that I did do well with that degree, only simply just for like even the ability to write well and
So
to write
you
clearly.
so then you graduated with a degree in English then.
Yeah. Hmm.
Okay. So but at that point in your life, your compass was still spinning around. You didn't really have a true north to have it pointed at. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had this degree once I finished college. I had kind of no idea even what I wanted to do or where I wanted to work. Um, I feel like, now it's very different where you're kind of more aware of like what the possibilities are out there, right? In terms of what your career is. But back then I had literally like no idea what I wanted to do.
I see. So, but you had a blip in photography, and you were like, I did you. I mean, obviously, you were in touch that you were with the fact that you were a very creative person, and not so much a techie, so to speak.
Hmm.
Um, and so then did you go to work in your field? And then how did photography become your North Star, the way that your life was pointed? So you got
It,
out of college and you
yeah,
went to work?
it kind of like photography actually kind of fell by the wayside for a long time when I was trying to figure out like what my career was going to be. Um, I at you know at the t- I moved to San Francisco. I just figured that it was like the nearest. Like I loved San Francisco. I've always been drawn to big cities, and so I had friends that lived there. So I moved to San Francisco and I just started like looking into like how I could possibly like what I could actually do with like the very limited skill set that I had. And I just started temping just because it seemed like a good thing to do at the time to figure out, because I could type, I could write, I could, you know, definitely do, administrative skills. Um, and then from there, it just kind of it led into project management, basically.
Okay.
Um, and so I worked in project management for a while, and project management is and that's and the English major definitely came in handy with that, right? Like a project manager is you need to build the right well, you have to be organized. You're just like kind of like the linchpin in terms of all these other moving parts. And project management is also it's broad enough so you could actually bring it to different industries, right? And so I worked in project management for a while, and then I wound up moving to New York. Um, I got laid off from the company that I was working at. It was like during the time when like like the .com internet bubble was very big in San Francisco. And then the company I worked for went under. I got laid off. I wound up moving to New York. Um, and in New York, I just, I bounced around. Um, my photography still was actually not even a thing then, just because it turned into something that I couldn't afford. Um, just in
So it was
terms of,
dormant.
I'm sorry.
So it was dormant.
My photography was dormant for a really long time. And then what happened was, um, I, I did my yoga teacher training, and this was in New York. And then I went on yoga retreat, and I just had like a very small point and shoot digital camera with me at the time. And I I just started like photographing people and teachers that were on the retreat with me, and it just kind of like reawakened like this love of photography that I had, that it was just kind of, it was there, but I think I kind of just forgotten like how much I actually loved it. And so,
How did yoga come into the picture? Did you just do it for fun and then decide to be a teacher? Or how did that happen to where you're like, I'm going to be a yoga teacher?
I have this idea that people come into yoga because they are healing from something, or trying to heal from something, or they're like looking for something. I had a really bad breakup, and I just basically needed something to really distract myself. And so I started, everyone's like, oh, because yoga has like this, it's almost like an aura around it, that it kind of transcends just more, just like it transcends just movement, right? There's like a spiritual aspect of it, and I just started taking yoga classes just to help, just see if I, just to help in recovery from this breakup.
You were looking for that inner peace, right?
Yes, exactly,
So
right. And
you were
so I
sledgehammering
came,
down a wall of, you had a bad breakup, you had to sledgehammer through that and get to a place of inner peace and tranquility, and you felt that yoga was a good place to do that. Is that right?
yeah, it's like I think a lot of people come to it as like a tool to help in some kind of like emotional recovery.
Mm-hmm. And that's good. A lot
And
of people don't know that. That's news to me. I didn't know that was, I mean, that makes plenty of sense.
yeah,
Although I didn't kind of connect the two there. And then, so did you then just get more and more into it? And then did you go to a retreat and then decide you were going to be a teacher, or?
no, what happened was like my teacher mentioned to me that I should look into teacher training, and I had no desire to become a yoga teacher. I still don't. But she told me that the majority of people who do teacher training actually don't wind up teaching. They do it to actually learn more about the yoga practice, and like what you're doing in class, to add, it's like to add like another layer of knowledge and dimension to what you're doing with your body.
Yeah, so yoga was your opportunity in adversity that you were going through to get inner peace. And so you're at yoga, your yoga teacher says, hey, you'd make a great teacher. You're like, okay, that's interesting. I'll go explore that.
Hmm.
Right. Then you go
And
to a
that's how,
yoga retreat and you just happen to have a camera with you and start shooting.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden these two areas actually make the connection to where you're like, wow, I got some catalyst behind me now. This is really fun,
Hmm.
creative. And so
Yeah.
things start to align for you. And I didn't even think most people, I mean, I think we make an assumption that there's movement photography, but I think it's interesting that there's actually a subculture or a niche that's literally pointed at movement photography. And I can imagine how technical that could end up being, because I know myself from, I've done 100 photo shoots for magazines, and a lot of the magazines that I did photo shoots for were martial arts magazines.
Hmm.
And they were like, we love working with you because we can take an 8-hour shoot and do it in 2 hours with you.
Yeah.
because I was able to get in sync with the photographer
Mm-hmm.
and be able to make my movements very easy for them to capture timing wise, which is actually a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, so take us through what movement photography is.
Um, in my definition, it's capturing like a fraction, it's like freezing a fraction of a second in time where the person is doing something that represents the beauty in their artistic expression of movement, right? So for a dancer, it could be the second where they jump and they're like actually like in the peak of their jump, right? For like a yoga teacher, it could be the moment of alignment where their limbs are stacked in a way which is not only aesthetically pleasing, but in a way that they can present themselves to the world as this is something that I can do. This is my alignment. This is how it looks. It's literally just like a fraction of a second of beauty, really. A beauty and that represents the person that you're capturing.
Yeah, what is that? One picture's worth 1,000 words, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Ideally, yeah, yeah, exactly.
So I know because I live in Huntington Beach, California. I live a mile away from the beach. I'm an avid surfer, and there's a lot of surf photographers, and a lot of times they're either, too early or too late, but when they're right on time, it's magic.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's like there's like a to me there's like a definite magic because as a photographer, you know when you capture that moment or if you've missed it.
does it take a lot of time so I'm imagining that the apprenticeship phase of actually becoming a master at this would be, it's supposedly 10,000 hours to, become a master at something. What was your learning curve like?
Um, I am fortunate enough to live in New York City where there are a lot of yoga teachers. And so in the beginning, I did a lot of work for free, basically in exchange for learning how to capture bodies and movement. And so I would say to get to the level where I'm at now, you have to work with a lot of different body types and capabilities within movement and um, almost have to learn to speak different languages because each type of movement also has its own language as well.
Because yoga has a lot of different subsections, right? Like there's, what is it, vinyasa yoga? I'm gonna stumble here, but there's a lot of different types of yoga, correct? And can you kind of, and did you have to become familiar? I mean, as a yoga teacher, are you familiar with, like, because there's a lot of little subsections of yoga, because I know my wife does it and she goes to these hot yoga classes that are like this way and these other yoga classes that are that way. It's like martial arts, right? There's
Yeah,
Taekwondo, there's Tang Soo Do, there's Kung Fu, there's Muay Thai.
yeah. I mean, within yoga, I think uh there's different names for different poses, but other than that, it's kind of similar in terms of just movements, just
Okay.
used in different ways in different genres of yoga.
Okay, so how does this morph into becoming your North Star, meaning that you can actually make a living doing this?
Um, well, I'd like to point out I'm not making a living from
Okay.
this.
Right.
It's like my side hustle, I would say.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I think in order to be like I have full respect for people who are able to do this full time because it is a hustle to have your own business regardless of what the business is. Um, and uh I can't actually imagine doing this full time.
So people people pay you though to
Yes.
capture these pictures? Because I know the surfers do. They have the photographers sell their pictures to the surfers, and they use those for like social media and all that kind of stuff. Is
Yeah.
that sort of what you do?
Yeah, definitely. People hire me to do a wide range of photography, like whatever they need at this point, I've had people hire me to do engagement shoots, which are fun. Like basically anything to do with people, I love doing. I love interacting with people. I love creating with people, meeting people, talking. People are very interesting to me. So, yes, I get hired to do photography. I've started getting hired now to do videography. Um, People
What are the
come.
challenges that a photographer, in your opinion, faces and has to overcome? What are some of the hurdles and obstacles that they have to overcome to become good at this?
Um, I mean, I guess the thing is, everyone is a photographer now. Um, the smartphones,
True. Yeah.
the smartphones are, you know, in like broad light, like in noon where it's very bright, like smartphones are very good at capturing a photograph, right? I think the first hurdle you have to overcome is why should someone hire you when their friend with, an iPhone could, the output looks kind of the same. And it's
What's the answer to that? Being able to catch that magic moment just by your eye instead of just by luck?
um I think it is the quality and the eye of what a professional photographer can bring.
Yeah, you
And a
bring up
lot
a
of
really good point and especially since Instagram's become so popular, you know,
mhm,
honestly, everybody is a photographer.
everyone is a photographer. And I've realized there's a lot of people out there that don't actually realize the difference between a great photograph and like, a so-so photograph.
What is the
But
difference?
um I mean, depending on what you're looking at, it could be the angle at which something is taken. It could be the facial expression. It could be how your subject is aligned in the location. Is there like a building coming out of like the back of their head, for example? Whereas someone who is used to working with people would definitely, move where the subject is so that a building doesn't actually come out the back of your head. There's angles that are more flattering than others. There's all these like little things that you actually wouldn't know unless you've just worked with hundreds of people.
So there's a lot of nuances in it to get it to where you go from an average photo to a great photo, an incredible moment in time that you've captured. I
Yeah.
know from photo shoots that I've done, they take a million shots and then they go through those and then they pick out ones that are really great. Is that what you do as well?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So does somebody take us through a photo shoot with a yoga person? Are they just going through these different poses and you are just capturing everything and then you start plucking things out, or what's the process like? Take us through that.
So usually, someone will book me for a 1 hour photo shoot, and I like to be very efficient. There's a few things that I think are important. One, that you move efficiently. Two, that all the photos don't look the same. And this is just, for these 1 hour shoots where someone needs content for social media, right? So it's like efficiency, not having everything look the same, because if you're paying for a photo shoot, you don't want everything to look the same. Like it kind of ties into like how social media works, right? Um, and then like and then I have them also prepare ahead of time. So um It's just knowing, it's understanding like what you're shooting, where you're shooting, and then how quickly you can move with someone.
How important is lighting? Do you bring your own lights? Because I know that a lot of photo shoots I've done that they're very particular about the lighting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I bring a small flash with me if I need it, but given the fact that it's just me, I don't bring lights unless I'm shooting only in one location and I'm not moving from there.
I see.
And usually when people come to New York and to shoot in New York, they want all these different locations. And so,
Okay.
in order to like move quickly, I keep my gear very light.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I mean that's interesting. They want different locations.
Uh-huh.
Um, it's in you. So do you feel that what you do is you're shooting primarily, from what I'm understanding, for people to use these photos for their social media content? Did you have to become really familiar with social media to be able to marry these two together?
Yeah, you also have to understand how social media works, I think. Um, and
Social media work in relation to photography. Now I'm like ultra interested. Like,
okay,
how do those two marry together?
because it's like people, so there's okay, like if we're just I'm just going to talk about Instagram photography for
Yeah,
a second right
because I
now,
think
right? So
I
it's
think
like,
most people like, I'm super interested because I part of my a big part of my business is social media, and I think a lot of people's big part of their business is social media, and I think a lot of people are obviously completely involved in social media. So you've got a great audience here. How the heck does
okay,
it work?
okay, so it's like you have your social media page, right? And when people look at it, just, they go to your profile, you want your page to look nice, right? And so you want the grid, like the grid of your page, like whatever, like the first 9 images, just to not be cluttered, um, and just to represent who you are. And so when I shoot, it's like I shoot with enough space around the subject so that when you are looking at the photo and on the grid, you can see what the person's doing without having it be like too large for Instagram. Like I had to learn to shoot like this because, coming from a background of photography, I would shoot for print. So I would fill the frame, I would use like the frame as a whole. And
Like
when
a
I start
canvas for a painting, right?
yeah, exactly, just for like a print, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And people, my first, models that I had were like, why are you shooting me so close? Because I would like, I would fill the frame and it's like, they'd be like, it doesn't look good on the grid. I can't fit it in my Instagram. It doesn't fit. It's too big. And so it's like I had to learn to back up. And so in order to accommodate how it would look for social media.
Interesting. Because I think most people probably aren't aware of it, but it actually matters, how I think your understanding of a person on the other end of social media that's actually looking at it would be very valuable, because a lot of people aren't aware of these things that as a human being are automatically either turn you off or draw you in. Is that right?
Yeah. And so like for instance, if you're doing something, so I also ask like what will these images be used for, right? Because if they're used for a website, I would shoot that differently than if they're only going to be used for social media.
I see. And
Mhm.
how has your understanding of the human body evolved and made you a better person for yourself and other people?
I mean, I wouldn't say that it's made me a better person. I would say that it's given me more of an understanding of how humans move, how miraculous and uh, the human body actually is. I have a lot of respect for the people who choose to put themselves in front of a camera. I think it's a vulnerable place to be in. And so like I'm whenever someone reaches out to me, like a new client, I'm
Yeah.
always very honored that they have actually chosen me to capture them.
Let me ask you this question, because I thought I heard you say that you've done like Taekwondo tournaments and other action sports
Yeah.
versus yoga, which is obviously slower moving.
Hmm.
Did you find that it was a bigger challenge to capture action sports that are happening much quicker, or is it kind of the same? You just hit the auto shoot, and then you go through and you pluck these out, or how does that, is it kind of the same or is it different?
Um, well, it wasn't a Taekwondo tournament. It was like two Taekwondo people I was shooting. I
Uh-huh.
think it was like pictures for their website. And I think like for me to capture something that I'm not familiar with, such as Taekwondo, like I don't practice Taekwondo, it's you kind of have to have like an I don't want to say an innate understanding of movement, but you have to be able to see what they're doing and then just start the process of shooting, review with your subjects at the time, the images like on the camera. This is especially if it's like if you're not familiar with something, right? And just be like, is this what you wanted me to capture?
Right.
Or, and like sometimes they'll be like, my leg wasn't straight. Let's reshoot it with my leg straight. Um, or like my alignment was a little bit off. Can we try reshooting it from a different angle? It's very much like if you're shooting something that's unfamiliar, it's a learning process along the way. And as a photographer, you have to be able to adapt to what you're being asked to shoot.
Is it always a collaboration between you and the subject as far as the end product goes?
Yeah, definitely. For me, absolutely. And it's actually one of the joys that I have in photography, which is why like I'm not drawn to like food photography or landscape photography. It's for me, it's the collaborative nature of actually working with another person to create something of beauty.
Do you have a favorite shot that you've done?
I have many favorite shots that I've done.
Okay. Okay, that's good. And how is photography, you know, how does that translate over to enhancing Renee as a person, right? Have you grown as a person through photography?
Yeah. Okay. So I said earlier that I didn't think it made me a better person. It has in many aspects, just in terms of meeting people, seeing how different people are, um, learning how to communicate with people, um, making people feel at ease, always doing like my best for them. Um, I've learned a lot about working with people and just how different everyone is and just learning to respect differences that people come to each shoot with.
What advice do you have because everybody's into social media.
Yeah.
Instagram, I believe, is probably the most popular social media platform out there, with deals with nothing but photography and videos. And a lot of people are doing this. What advice do you have for, let's say, young people coming up that want to be photographers, or people that want to be better photographers for their own, social media platforms? And how does somebody get better at photography? What advice do you have?
I think it's just the same advice as like you would give to someone on how to become a better podcaster, and it's just to do it. You just Like you just have to put in the work, and it's like inevitably you will get better. Um, but I think that you also have to be willing to want to get better. You have to be able to look. For me, it's like there's like so many photographers that I consider better than myself, and for me, it's I'm always questioning like what can I do to get better? Like what is it about this person's work that I respect, that I think that I might not be doing as well, and then how can I improve upon that? Like there's a very big technical side to photography. Like I consider shooting the photo half of the work. The other half for me is editing it.
So you
And
have to
then
be, so then, in your opinion, what I'm hearing you saying is that, when I do personal coaching with people, the first question I ask, I say, are you kind of interested in this? Or are you committed to it?
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Because, and a lot of times they'll say, that's a very interesting question. Why do you ask that? And I
Mm-hmm.
say, well, because it's been my experience personally, and then also with clients, that if you're interested, you'll find every reason to quit. But if you're committed, you'll stop at nothing to accomplish whatever it is that you're questing for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So
and exactly. And I think the commitment is actually is what just drives you further, and whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Like it doesn't even have to be photography, it could be marathon running. Like don't think I could ever commit enough to being a runner
yeah,
to try a marathon, right? And so it's just I feel like it goes beyond just interest. It's almost like a soul, like it's captured your soul in some way.
yeah, it's almost like, I think one of the interesting things that I'm hearing about photography is that there, I mean, so beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? And some people like Michelangelo, some people hate Michelangelo, right? And some
Hmm.
people like this artist and they don't like that artist. So what I'm trying to get at here is it doesn't look like there's a ceiling, right? Because it's all subjective.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes and no, right? Because it's like the I wouldn't even yes, but there's definitely people that are better than others. I would have to say,
Okay, so
yeah.
let's
Yeah.
let's dive into that for a second. What is the difference between a good photographer or like an average photographer, a good photographer, and like what makes a great
I
photographer?
think it is the ability to actually, like if we're looking at it like just even from like a social media standpoint, right? Like people are just scrolling on their phones. I think a great photo has the ability to stop someone, first of all, from scrolling and to actually look a little bit carefully, right? Like it 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 has to make someone look at it and either think about like what the subject is doing, where the subject is. Like I shoot a lot outdoors with natural light. I love the unpredictability of natural light and like what the elements will give you on any certain day, right? Um, so it's just something that gives you pause, or it could be if you're shooting people, it could be like an expression, it could be um even something technical, like was it shot wide angle, so like the limbs are like a little bit like distorted, like I feel like a great photographer just consistently brings photos that give pause.
Right? Because I know that people
Right.
scroll, but what actually makes them
Yeah.
stop,
Yeah.
right? Get in their track. And I imagine that there's a whole science behind that, because I think that people aren't, I know for myself that I'm kind of unaware of what makes me stop,
Hmm.
right? But that's your job.
Right, exactly. So And I mean, it's like when I'm editing a photo, it's not, my goal isn't to like what can make someone stop scrolling. It's just me actually doing something to the best of my ability. And if it makes someone pause, and that's just like something extra.
Yeah, that's awesome. So are you aspiring to make this your full-time career, or are you just, you know, completely happy with doing this, you know, as a side hustle? What's next for you in photography?
Just from a personal standpoint, I think I'm at like an age where I don't have any interest in taking the risk of being a full-time creative. Um, I think there's just a lot of unpredictability because, like, for instance, when COVID happened, I went from shooting every day to shooting zero. And
Yeah.
and that was like such a shock. It was like almost, it was very much like my creative world was completely upended. And so I was just thinking, like, if I was actually a full-time photographer at that point, I think that I would have freaked out a lot more than I did.
Sure. I
And
mean,
so
yeah.
it's it's very it's like some years you can do really, really well. And then some years, let's say there's a recession, people have like less money to spend on things like social media or updating their website.
Hmm.
Um, then it's, like then your career is very much tied to those kinds of fluctuations. It's
Yeah.
it's it's stressful.
Yeah, I owned a very thriving gym before COVID.
Hmm.
And you know, it's the difference between if I was just a trainer at a facility, right? And I had a different main income rather than having that my entire main income, because overnight, you know, everything was completely shut down. So, you know, it's a great risk that you take,
Yeah.
taking that on. And even if you're a full-time photographer for muscle and fitness or whatever, right? If all that kind of shuts off, then you're shut completely off too. So you're at the mercy of a lot of things at that point,
Yeah.
including
And
your company, right?
yeah. And I think having to do your art as full-time work, um, there it kind of changes how you feel. Actually,
Sure.
let me retract this a little bit, actually, because it's like I feel like if I became a full-time photographer, I would have to do weddings. Like I would have to, right? Because this is like the main way a lot of photographers make money is wedding photography. I have zero interest in wedding photography. And I think that you'd have to, in order to survive, you would have to take jobs that don't actually spark the joy that you have for your art.
Mhm.
And it becomes different a little bit in that way.
Sure. It's like being a musician where you're out there playing and you're having fun, and you know, the next thing you know, you get a record deal, and then all of a sudden the pressure's on, right? You have to spit this record out. You have
Yeah.
to create, right?
Yes.
Instead of it creative being a flow, it becomes forced. It's something that you have to do. And, you know, I can see that really shutting down the creative process and putting pressure on something that was fun. Because for me personally, when I was fighting, I was having a great time. And then we win our very first huge title and come in and everybody's somber and serious. I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, well, we have to win this fight. We have to win this next fight. Right. And I was like,
Yeah.
what happened to kicking the crap out of people and having fun? Like,
Yeah.
you know, that's
Yeah.
what we got into this. We were all having a great time, you know, and on the party bus and having fun and doing our thing. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, it becomes this thing where you have to do it. And there's pressure, and that takes a lot of the creative fun out of what you're receiving as a artist, a martial artist, a photography artist, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of pressure on that. Do you feel the same way?
Um, I mean, I'm in the fortunate position that I don't, because it's not my full-time job. Um, I was thinking to I was thinking about photographers that are actually lucky to be working full time in what they love. And I have so much respect for them, right? Like baby photographers or family photographers. Um, I feel like they uh if you're a good photographer, it is possible to do it full time and to have enough clientele to actually support yourself. And I think that's amazing.
So what's next for you? Just more of the same?
I've asked myself this question a lot, and I am not sure. Video is something new for me. I find that it's very different than photography, and it works my brain in a different way that I enjoy.
Can
So
you expand
I
on
might.
that for a second? Because that's interesting. I don't think that most people, you know, I'll speak for myself. I was like, you know what? She's right. That's a whole different animal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. It is, and I started off, just with photography, and because of how social media has evolved and what people are asking for, then I started looking into video, um, because it is something extra that you can offer your clients, right?
Sure.
And it's definitely something that I'm interested in. It's just a whole different animal. And I feel like in terms of like where I am in the process, I'm still like at the bottom of the mountain.
Do you feel that your photography experience will benefit you in the video world, or are you not there yet?
um, I mean, just in terms of, yeah, definitely, actually, because all videos are just many, 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 many images, right? It's just many, like tons more, it is just like what you learn just in terms of what is visually interesting can definitely be applied to videography as well.
I would think, and of course I'm in the nosebleed seats, right? But I would think it's a lot more challenging to tell a story in one frame than it would be to tell a story in several frames.
With photography, it's a two-dimensional image, right? It's like one perspective.
Mhm.
As soon as you open it up to video, it's like you enter in a world where it's 3D. It's very different animals. So it's like you have someone doing something, right? And in a photograph, you take it from one angle and that's your photo. But as soon as you introduce video and movement around a subject, I almost consider it just very different worlds.
Sounds like it. And I can tell you one thing after having this interview with you, photography is a lot more, a lot deeper than just snapping a photo.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the thing is like with the photographers editing and how they use what they capture,
Uh-huh.
it's like another layer of how you can make the person looking at your photo feel something as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining there's a whole art in editing as much as being able to capture the image. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. When I started videography, it's interesting that you say that you it's like once you learn about something, you start looking at it differently. Like once I started getting more into video, I started just looking at movies differently. Like the cuts that people take, between videos, the angles, the color grading. It's like you start looking at things from like a more technical perspective.
Yeah, it's like me watching a UFC fight.
Okay.
You know
Okay.
what I mean?
Oh, right,
I'm
right,
looking
right.
at.
Because
Mhm.
like all the technicalities behind like what is actually happening.
Correct. And that's, I think, what makes you a really great coach too, is
Yeah.
to be able to know those things, understand it, and then convey it to another person. Because I have friend of mine that just won an amateur world championship that's looking to turn pro, and he reached out to me and he is asking for my help and coaching him, you know. And it's interesting where he is in the process, and what, as a great quote unquote photographer, that I could bring to his world to expand that and really put him on the fast track to doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with that. So anyway, well, this has been really great. I think it's been really great for people that are on social media, which is pretty much everybody,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
a lot of interesting facts about photography and how and what matters and what doesn't matter, and so on. Is there anything that you'd like to cover that we haven't covered?
Um, uh, well, um,
What about photography haven't we talked about?
I mean, there's a lot about photography. I mean, it's not even just the act of photography. It's like how you work with people, right? Like
Interesting.
it's yeah. Um,
Do
which
you
is
feel
so
that relationship matters quite a bit in the end product?
um I think so. I think that you can kind of tell how comfortable you like someone is with their photographer. And I think this is true, like what makes someone a good portrait photographer is like their ability to work with people, to make people feel at ease, to kind of draw what they want out of the subject.
Yeah, you get these little videos of like these big photo shoots for models that are doing it professionally, and
Mm-hmm.
how the photographers kind of talking and coaching the subject along to get them in the flow or the zone to get the shot.
Yeah.
Do you do
And a
that
lot
quite a
of
bit with your subjects?
yeah, and it's a lot of it is just like building a relationship with your model. And honestly, like social media helps a lot with that. Just in terms of like who you're following, who you're watching. And it's like a lot of like if you talk to a lot of models, I think a lot of them would say their favorite a lot of their favorite photographs are ones that they've had an established relationship with the photographer, right? It's like a level of comfort that you have.
So
um
let's say I hire you to do some photography for me, and
mhm,
and obviously my photography and my social media drives my income, let's just say, or drives the way I feel about it, whatever. So would you then go and say, okay, and go to my social media page and look through that and try to get a feel for who I am before you do the shoot?
absolutely. I think it's part of if you're a photographer shooting for anyone's social media content, it is important that you also do your research. Like you can't just, I mean, obviously you can, but for me, I think it's important to see like because it's like you look at someone's social media page, what they've shown, what they've decided to show is what they're interested in, what they feel like represents them. And so,
What
a
a huge
photographer.
advantage that would give a photographer now. I mean, this is such a this okay, so here's a little diamond in the interview, right? So what a huge advantage it would give a photographer now, having social media and being able to go and get an idea of who this person is
Mm-hmm.
before they go shoot them, to
Yeah.
where when I was doing my photos, there was no social media, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
you're going in cold,
Yeah.
right? And you're trying to get to know the photographer in a very
Mm-hmm.
short amount of time, create a rapport with that photographer, and
Yeah.
then create magic, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas now you can go and do research, figure out kind of who this person is before you go actually meet them physically and
Yeah.
start trying to capture that magic moment. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Definitely. And for me as a movement photographer, I can go and I can see like and understand how the person moves as well and what they are capable of doing. especially with yoga. There's like different levels of mobility, right? So it helps me understand like how they move. And
So do you go in and because we're gonna run a little bit over because I find this to be fascinating and really, the gold here, or part of the gold here, is do you go into the photo shoot with the subject after doing research with a good idea of what you're wanting to capture?
yeah, yeah.
That's fascinating. So, and
And
then how
especially
do
like
you?
especially in New York as well, I
Uh-huh.
start then thinking of location, like
Okay.
where, even like how quickly a person moves depends on where we're going to be shooting as well.
So, in your opinion, is a lot of the photography like, you know, location, location, location?
Yeah, a lot of it, like part definitely, which is why you talk to a lot of photographers, and it's like you have to scout out locations before you shoot. Like whenever I go to a new city, like when I'm traveling, I've never been there, I do my Instagram research initially, and then once I'm there, I always build in time for location scouting.
And because does that marriage between the location and the subject create the magic moment?
Yeah, location, light, what the person's doing, they all contribute to capturing like a beautiful image.
Yeah, that's a fascinating, you know, and for me, before I started this interview, I was like, okay, photography, like you shoot a picture. No, there's so much more involved in it to make it, great
Yeah,
instead of, just average, because the difference between being like here and 50 feet over there could make all the difference in the world, or
for
from
sure.
this location to that location, because a lot of that, now that I think about it, is it's so true, but you really don't think about that's part of what stops you in your tracks, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
To take a closer look at what the image is.
Hmm. And like what makes you actually take pause and spend a little bit more time with that image.
Right. Because I mean, I can think or imagine that the location is the showstopper, right? And then
It
they
can be, but it also
go into
can
you.
also not be.
Yeah, well, because I've done hundreds of photo shoots, and they're like, well, we have to get the morning light. We
Yeah.
want to get it
Oh,
as the sun's setting,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And all of this other stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, but aren't we just doing a photo? No, 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 you don't understand.
Yeah, and like light, of course, light is like another element which plays a big part.
Yeah, I can imagine that it could, make it or break it, frankly. I mean,
Yeah, it 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 can definitely elevate an image. Like if
yeah,
you
and
have
the
like a
more I think about it,
majestic sunrise or a
mhm,
majestic sunset, like there's nothing like it.
it's amazing that you say that, because when I'm interviewed, so I paddleboarded the entire West Coast and the entire East Coast, and they say, what was the difference? What was one of the main differences? And I said, well, on the West Coast, I would cry at the sunsets. They're
Uh-huh.
so magic and so beautiful. And
Right.
I can tell you and everybody watching and listening to this podcast that many times when I paddled the East Coast, I would literally fall down on my knees when I'm prob I'm not the most dramatic guy in the world, but let me just tell you, I would fall down on my knees, I would cry, and I would thank God for this magic moment that I have been gifted.
Mm-hmm.
The most amazing, beautiful sunrises with the most incredible backdrop of nature and the world that we live in. And I thought to myself, how special is this moment in time? And that's the God's honest truth. So
Yeah.
bringing that to a photograph would be something incredibly important and special, I would think.
It 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 just adds a little bit of more magic to what you're doing.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, thank you so much for taking us down the rabbit hole of photography, because it's been a really great journey, and we're really grateful for your time and for
Yeah, thank
your.
you for having me. It was nice to meet you.
If you like this video, hit that subscribe button and share this with some of your friends.